A very good morning to you all, and thank you for joining the virtual event State of Play Fintech in Nigeria. This is a represented delivery of the Economist Intelligence Unit's Fintech research on Nigeria, made possible by MTN Group and Mastercard. My name is Camila Oros. I'm the Managing Director of City Productions, agent for the Economist in West Africa. And with me today is Bewaji Adeniji. She is the business developer of City Productions, very well known by a lot of you for the past months since we've started this major initiative on fintech in Nigeria. A few notes at the beginning of the session. As the majority of the audience may very well know, the research is a first step into a major initiative, a research-based event that's supposed to take place on March 26, 2020 in Lagos, Nigeria. However, the world and someone up just proved to us that he can decide what to do and how to do. Therefore, we had to put a hold on the event and reshift, re-strategize for later. I want just to take the time to let everyone know and to thank all of our strategic partners, sponsors, media collaborators in the main event, and promise them to have our conference as soon as possible. This is something very important for us, and definitely today is a first step into the main event, the delivery of the research. As we said, today's webinar focuses on the delivery of the EIU Research State of Play made possible by Mastercard and MTN Group. The report examines key trends in the fintech sector in Nigeria and assesses both industry drivers and impediments to further growth. Thank you also to our event hosts, SkySat Technology Nigeria, representative of Konica Minolta, our technology collaborators, which have invited us today into their offices on a state-of-the-art multi-story building strategically located on Sakatinubu in Victoria Island. Moving on regarding the program of the webinar will note the delivery of the research, followed by lively conversations with both MTN Group and the Mastercard, ending with few Q&A from the audience. So keep this in mind. Write your questions in the QA section and let us know. We will take your question definitely into consideration. Moving on, I would like to take the time and have a brief introduction to Irene Mia. Irene Mia is the global editor, thought leadership at the Economist Group. In her role, she's responsible for leading and growing the thought leadership business globally, according to Economist Group standards of editorial quality, creativity, and independence. She holds an MA in Latin American Studies from the Institute for the Studies of Americas, London University, and a PhD in International Economic and Trade Law from El Bocconi. She speaks a lot of languages between Italian, French, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Irene is supposed to be with us in March. On March, hopefully she will be, we will bring her to Nigeria eventually, that's a promise. Next, and very well known, is Melanie Norona. She's a senior editor for the Economist Intelligence Thought Leadership Division and is the editorial lead for the Middle East and Africa. Over the past 4 years, she has led global and regional research projects on financial services and fintech, trade, infrastructure, technology, and innovation, just to name a few. She has an MSc in international strategy and economics from the University of St. Andrews. Welcome. Moving forward to MTN, Anthony Usoro, a very warm welcome. He is the CEO of Yellow Digital Financial Services, the fintech subsidiary of MTN Nigeria. He is an expert in payments with almost 2 decades of experience developing and managing payment and financial service products in both banking and telecommunications industries. He's a graduate of computer science, holds an MBA from the Lagos Business School. He's also an associate member of the Institute of Directors. Next in line, and a very warm welcome to Ebehije Momo, Senior Vice President, General Manager, West Africa, Mastercard, a role that she has held since December 2019. Based in Nigeria, Ebehije is responsible for advancing the Mastercard brand presence in West Africa, deploying innovative payment solutions and partnering with local governments and market regulators to build a world beyond cash. She holds a BSc in chemistry from the University of Lagos and MBA from the University of Benin. In addition, she has an MBA from Bangor University, Wales, United Kingdom, and is a chartered banker in Nigeria and Scotland. She's also an honorary member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Welcome to you all. Very nice seeing you today. Very interesting conversations. I think we should just move on with the delivery of the research, a long-awaited delivery. Very excited about this. Therefore, Irene, it's your task now to tell us what is new in Nigeria on the fintech domain. Thank you.
Thanks, Camelia, and good morning, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here with you virtually from London, as you can see from my background. Of course, we would have preferred to be in Lagos in person to discuss the fintech research, but as Camelia said, unfortunately, COVID-19 disrupted our initial plans. So it's great that Camelia is actually offering us a virtual platform to present the research virtually. I'm sure the conversation today will be as lively and interesting as the one we would have had in Lagos. Hopefully, we'll have one in Lagos later on in the year. But in the meantime, you know, I think you'll all like the finding of this research. So, I mean, just to set the scene a little bit for the research, obviously, digital innovation is disrupting the finance industry across the world in an unprecedented way and also with an unprecedented pace. We really, from mobile money, online lending platform, digital currency, and blockchain, a range of new projects and players are creating new opportunities to better serve the consumers and also to enable SMEs and firms to operate better. In Africa, the impact of this disruption of fintech could be actually revolutionary. It has already been revolutionary in many countries. Fintech firms, in fact, by creating a variety of tech-based products and solutions, are really filling large gaps that exist in the local financial service industry. Also in Africa, in the region where 66% of the adult population is unbanked, fintech can play really a key role in driving financial inclusion outside of the traditional banking systems. The opportunity to give millions of people at SMEs better access to short and long-term financing would actually close a huge economic gaps and also would give business leaders the capacity to build smarter companies. As an example, we always hear about M-Pesa, which was, I would say, the father of all mobile money services, and was born in Kenya in 2007. So when we look at the financial inclusion at the time in 2007 in Kenya, that stood at 27%. Currently is 83%. So really, fintech can help in filling the financial inclusion gap. Fintech is also a thriving investment opportunity globally. If we look at the numbers, the fintech sector has received more investment than other sectors in the last 3 years across the world. Total investment activity globally in fintech, if we combine venture capital, private equity, and merger and acquisition, reached a peak of about $120 billion in 2018. And it was up from just 51 billion the year before. So really the pace and the dynamism in investment in the sector is also quite astonishing. Africa, as you know, is home to the youngest labor force in the world. It also has a rapidly growing rate of mobile phone use and internet use. So really providing services, financial services to this market has a major potential. And that's actually something that we've seen in the interest of global investors across the world, be them venture capital investors at Silicon Valley, or also international financial institutions, or even global payment giants across the world. All those actors are taking an interest in Africa and are investing in Africa in the fintech sector. And in fact, we have seen actually an exponentially rate of growth of the fintech sector in the region, about annual rate of 24% growth between 2009 and 2019. And this growth is actually fueled mostly by fintech in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. Nigeria, in particular, is the largest country by GDP and population in the region, and is among the continent fintech leaders. If the opportunities that are actually in such a large market for fintech are really endless. If we look at some just data in terms of mobile access and internet access, we see that currently in Nigeria there are 100 million unique mobile subscribers, which are projected to increase to 130 million by 2025. Also, the unique mobile subscribers are about 126 million. So really, it is a big sector, and if you look at the revenue associated with fintech, we see that this revenue associated to fintech in Nigeria is forecast to reach an estimated 500 million by 2022. So it's a big sector. Of course, there are also challenges in scaling up the opportunities of fintech, including, I would say, one of the things that also Mel will look at in our conversation is really the regulation aspect of fintech, right? As we've seen across the world, regulation in a way are always catching up with innovation and digital disruption. So it's really important to develop the right regulatory ecosystem. So smarter regulation that are flexible, regulation that are transformative, can adapt to the different disruption in the sector. It's also very important to develop a culture that embraces collaboration and innovation between incumbent and the startups. But also there are other risks and challenges associated, for instance, with data privacy and ownership. There is a risk associated with increased level of indebtedness if fintech and financial inclusion doesn't go hand in hand with financial literacy and education, which is actually something very important, something that needs to be, I would say, it needs to go hand in hand with the development of fintech in the world. With that in mind, as Camelia said, we embarked at the end of last year into a research project to really try and assess the state of play of the fintech sector in Nigeria. So we looked at different things. We researched the solution Nigerian fintech providers are focusing on, particularly at the moment, what are the solution and product of most potential. We look at health of the fintech ecosystem in the country. So we looked at the presence, availability of venture capital investment. We look at skills for the development of the fintech sector, and also, of course, at the regulatory environment in the country. We also look at the key challenges and bottlenecks that the country faces, the fintech startups in the country face as the sector matures and really become more mainstream. So Melanie, who is my colleague in this webinar with me, coordinated the research. The research involved lots of in-depth research, but also interviews with experts and regulators in the region. And I will let Mel, of course, present the main findings, because obviously we are all here to hear them. But before that, I just wanted to thank again Mastercard and MTN for supporting our research project. They've been our financial sponsor for this research endeavor. And also I want to thank City Production and Camelia for making all of this possible. And I'm really excited to be here. I hope we'll be soon in Lagos as well. We can all meet in person. But in the meantime, thanks so much, Camelia, for having us here. And Melanie, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Irene. And again, thank you to Camelia and CT Productions for organizing this virtual event. I think Irene has really set the scene for this, so I don't think I need to do much of an introduction. One thing I think I do want to talk to you about first is possibly just our research approach to this piece. As part of the research efforts, we really undertook extensive desk research, data analysis, and in-depth interviews. And you can see some of the people that we interviewed for this research on your screen. We did cover, it was an exhaustive piece covering regulatory side of things as well. And we interviewed someone at the Central Bank of Nigeria specifically. We interviewed CEOs at investment funds and fintech funds, as well as academics and other industry experts. Now, one thing to note is that we did complete the research just as the coronavirus pandemic had started. But I think this research and the fintech sector in particular is all the more important during this time. With people unable to visit bank branches and with this increased focus on digital services, it only reinforces the need to accelerate growth in this sector. So our research really takes a look at some of the medium and long-term trends and takes that long-term view of this sector. And some of the trends we identified continue really to define the trajectory of the sector. So to jump right into it, we started by looking at the state of fintech in Nigeria. And indeed, the outlook is quite positive. Nigeria has been among the leaders of fintech on the African continent. And as Irene mentioned as well, there's a strong forecast for growth in fintech revenues in Nigeria. You can see the numbers on your screen. And I think underpinning this as well is a large base of unique mobile subscribers, which are estimated at around 100 million, as Irene mentioned, as well as a large unbanked population, which is about 40 million people in Nigeria. And this latter point is actually quite interesting. Financial inclusion has really been a perennial problem in Nigeria, mainly because of insufficient bank branches and ATMs, difficulties with securing a biometric verification number, and high service fees in the past, although there have been some developments on this front. But combined, all of this has really proved problematic in terms of access and affordability. So the unbanked in Nigeria in that way could be an attractive pool of potential customers for fintech firms that are effectively able to address these issues of access and affordability. Now, looking a little bit at the journey of Nigerian fintech, and what we're seeing is that payments and remittances have really been the most developed subsector. Early on, you had players like InterSwitch that came into play, and over the years, companies like Paystack, Chipper Cash, Flutterwave have really established themselves, facilitating digital payments. And over time, Nigerian fintechs have really branched out from making payments into mobile lending, targeting SMEs and retail businesses as well. And they've really come up with innovative ways to assess creditworthiness for online loans. And Carbon is one example of that. Looking a little at mainstream banks, they were actually initially a bit slow to respond to this digital era, but have recently adapted apps and tools in areas like loans. And we're seeing examples from a Guarantee Trust Bank, such as Quick Credit. We're seeing examples from FCMB like Credit Direct, and Sterling Bank, they have a product called Spectre. So that's actually quite an interesting development in the Nigerian fintech space. Mainstream banks are also developing partnerships with fintech firms, I apologize. And one example of this is actually FCMB, which has recently put out a tender for payroll solutions and is partnering with a fintech firm on this. From our research, what we found is that the next phase of growth for fintech will really come from wealth management and insurtech. And we're already seeing companies emerging in this space. So Cowrywise is quite active in this space, and Cassava SmartTech is active in the insurtech space, offering auto, education, and health coverage. Now, the evolution of Nigerian fintech has really been guided by regulatory and policy developments. And you can see a suite of regulation really that CBN has launched over the years. And it really started with the Payment System Vision 2020, which was launched in 2007. Another notable milestone, I think, is the National Financial Inclusion Strategy in 2012. And in fact, that target for financial inclusion was just recently revised to about 95% by 2024. So there's a lot of development in that space. The CBN has also introduced charges on large cash-based transactions, and has reduced charges on a number of banking services as well. Most recently, we're seeing that they've introduced payment service banking, as a result of which even non-traditional players are now entering the space, including telecom companies, retailers such as supermarkets, all entering the financial space. What I think is important to note, though, is that while enabling businesses to make e-payments and to operate in this digital ecosystem, regulators must also protect consumers and businesses from financial crimes, including fraud and money laundering. And that is definitely a delicate balance that they need to strike. And so although we've seen a lot of exciting developments in this space, there are still some challenges. I think one important one to note is that there are a raft of regulations, but a lot of the time these are overseen by different authorities. So you have the Central Bank of Nigeria, you have the Securities Exchange Commission, and you have the Nigeria Communications Commission as well. I think fees to gain financial services license also remain high, and money laundering rules can be onerous, particularly for smaller fintech firms to comply with. The Fintech Roadmap Committee has also done an in-depth study on this, and they have identified additional issues. One of them is weak cybersecurity, and the CBN has actually already issued some guidelines to address this. Fintech firms are also quite constrained by limited access to consumer data as a result of the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation of 2019. And I think what's interesting to note here is that this too, in a way, is an example of that delicate balancing act. You know, should they foster innovation or should they ensure consumer protection? So definitely quite a challenging consideration. Now, some plans that are in the pipeline to address some of these challenges, but also push through regulation that interviewees actually indicated that are much sought after, include the Electronic Transaction Bill, which seeks to promote e-commerce in Nigeria by harmonizing legal rules on payments. Crowdfunding has also seen recent regulation from the SEC, and digital banking licenses are also much sought after, as more fintech firms, I think, seek to follow the footsteps of Kuda, which is a digital-only bank. Now, while they have been proactive in setting up a lot of these regulatory developments, I think it's important to stay ahead of the curve. And to enable them to do so, Nigeria, as have many countries around the world, they are taking a sandbox approach. So setting up a controlled environment in which innovative fintech products are trialed under a regulator's supervision. And the sandbox they've set up is the Financial Industrial Innovation Sandbox, launched in December 2019. And in fact, the Fintech Roadmap Committee recommends that all fintech startups should be encouraged to set up under this national sandbox, rather than having different sandboxes under individual regulators. Now, taking a look at the broader fintech ecosystem, to develop and flourish, Nigerian fintechs really need to address some of the shortcomings there. And we first looked at investment capital. Now, Nigerian fintechs have done well in raising capital. They've raised over $679 million in 2019, according to WeTracker. And while this investment is forthcoming, interviewees tell us that a majority of it comes from abroad, with Nigerian investors currently playing a small role. But there are some promising signs here for change. I think the establishment of more Pan-African funds, such as Cathay Africa Invest Innovation Fund, could help startups grow across borders. And to boost SME access, the Nigerian Stock Exchange recently launched the Nigerian Growth Board. So there are some emerging signs there that there is some change in the approach of investors. Another element that we looked at in the fintech ecosystem is skills. And in fact, as the sector matures, there's a skills gap emerging outside of product development in areas such as business management, marketing, and communications. Business expertise, rather than just technical coding knowledge, is crucial if fintechs are to generate the revenues they need to sustain the next phase of business growth. And in fact, when we spoke to interviewees, they did share a couple of other skills like corporate governance and compliance that are increasingly important to their sector. As startups start to scale up and seek more funding, corporate governance know-how will particularly be important. And in the fintech space, given the sensitivities around financial services, having your compliance skills in-house will also be crucial. Now, we cannot have a discussion on fintech in Nigeria without talking about financial inclusion. The central bank has really put this front and center and really defined it as the impetus for developing the fintech sector in Nigeria. And surveys conducted have revealed that the percentage of financially excluded adults in Nigeria has actually reduced from about 42% in 2016 to about 37% in 2018. But a causal link with fintech specifically is a little unclear. So I think the real measure for fintech firms will be to see if they're able to reach people who are currently excluded from the financial system. And there is anecdotal evidence of this progress. So one CEO that we interviewed of Innovectives, which offers agent banking and e-payment services, he actually told us that they have created accounts for over 750,000 adults who were previously unbanked. And their target over the next few years is to reach about 3 million more people. But even he cites issues around identification that continue to be an impediment. There is also a large gender gap, which is slowing progress on financial inclusion. Now, while the overall share of Nigerians with a bank account has increased, the gap between men and women rose from 7% in 2011 to about 24% in 2017. So just over a quarter of women have a bank account, compared with more than half of men, according to the World Bank. And fintech really has the potential to remedy this. Some services will do so indirectly by simply just bringing services to the unbanked. But some fintechs are developing solutions very specifically for women. One example is Access Bank that has a mobile wallet offering micro savings. Another is a mobile money partnership between Stellar and a fintech service provider, Oradian, which allows rural women to transfer money. So there is really an opportunity for fintech to design products aimed at closing that gender gap. I think just to summarize what I've presented here, it's clear that activity in the Nigerian fintech sector is growing, not just in terms of developing solutions, but also in terms of investment activity. And we're seeing involvement from a wide spectrum of players, whether it's tech firms, technological firms, and even non-financial actors such as telecoms companies and retailers such as supermarkets. The regulatory environment, while not perfect, is well regarded by companies and academic experts. Here, I think it's important again to remember that there's a delicate balance to strike between opening up the sector to foster innovation and fighting financial crime and ensuring data privacy and cybersecurity. As the ecosystem matures, skills gaps are emerging from outside of programming and product development in areas like marketing, communications, and business development. And this is really an area that fintech firms should truly be mindful of. And yet, while these challenges do exist, I think these challenges can be overcome. A Pan-African free trade agreement could improve talent mobility and regulatory alignment. Innovation sandboxes will refine the regulatory framework further and can really help set up the next wave of growth in wealth management and insurtech and in crowdfunding. And truly, domestic success stories will only inspire a new wave of fintech in Nigeria. And together, hopefully, they can all move the needle on financial inclusion as well. That really brings me to the end of my presentation. There's a lot more detail in the report, and I encourage everybody to access the report on our website. I think we'll be sharing a link to the report after this panel. And so with that, I'd like to hand back to Camelia.
Thank you very much, Mel. That's true. We were going to share all the details of the report afterwards on your website, on EIU's website, and also on ours, on City Productions. Just to continue, our next guest is Usoro, that he will have a brief presentation. We're very looking forward to it. And thank you again to MTN Group for making this research possible. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on what part of the world that you're in. Firstly, I really will say a big thank you to the Economist team for the brilliant work they've done on this research. I think it's been very insightful, reading through the various comments and the various input that has been made to this research. For us in MTN, fintech and financial inclusion is one area that is very important for us. We always see ourselves in MTN as a company that drives economic growth and development in the various countries that we operate. And digital and financial inclusion is one area where we think it's very critical in the countries that we operate to ensure that we drive that needed economic growth and development. And that's why in Nigeria, working with the Economist team and working with the various stakeholders to produce reports like this that would stimulate debate, stimulate conversations around what are we doing right, what are the challenges in the sector, and how can we work together as different stakeholders within that area to drive the required objective. The CBN in their revised goal for financial inclusion lately have said they want to drive inclusion to as much as 95% by 2024. That barely is 4 or 5 years from now. And if we recognize the fact that the earlier target that was set had to be revised because it appeared that we would be unable to meet those numbers. It's important that as different stakeholders in the industry that we start working together to see how we can ensure that leveraging fintech, that we can drive financial inclusion. And that's why this report for us, working with the Economist to come up with this research for us has been very important. I would maybe try and dwell on maybe some of the areas that some of the challenges that the report threw up. How do we ensure that the 40% of Nigerians today that are financially excluded are brought into the universe of financial services? A number of issues were raised, and I think we cannot always divorce the discussions around financial inclusion and fintech from firstly the regulatory environment. The regulation in Nigeria has evolved, and I think it's important to note that it's evolved positively. It's evolved in the right direction. We started years ago from a regulatory environment that was somewhat restrictive, And the CBN has taken time to learn, to understand the sector, and rapidly update their policies to ensure that there is an open environment for all players to operate and a level playing field for all players. And I think that's been very helpful. And that's why we've seen that there's been an uptick in the percentage growth in financial inclusion. But we need to accelerate that growth. We need to accelerate that uptick to ensure that by 2024, which is the year that CBN is targeting to achieve 95% inclusion, that we're able to achieve that. And some of the problems and the challenges that your report has highlighted are the areas we almost need to really look at. You talked about access to banking infrastructure, and that's very important. We need to look at low-cost models for ensuring that we can deliver financial services to the last mile. And traditionally, it's always been a mix of omni-channels, whether we're looking at agent network, whether we're looking at using the mobile phone as a channel, a cheap and effective channel to deliver services to the last mile. Those are areas that we need to look at. But I think one of the critical channels would always be distribution, especially when you look at the literacy levels of the people that we're targeting. They may not be very literate enough in the early days to start accessing financial services through a mobile phone. And so an agent network that usually serves as that first contact to educate them and to onboard customers is always very important. And I think that's where, as stakeholders in the industry, it has to be a collaborative approach to ensure that all players can leverage the various assets. Interestingly, that's one area that as telecommunications companies, it's one that we lend ourselves to easily, given the fact that we traditionally distribute our products through those channels. A second area, and I think one that you also pointed out in your report, is the issue of identification. It's been a major challenge in Nigeria, and I think all various reports have always pointed that out. And I think your report also was clear in that area. The issue of identification is one that we all must work together as an industry to ensure that we can address. Today, we have pockets of databases that attempt to address the same problem, whether it's the BVN with the financial institutions, whether it's the SIM reg that telecommunications company drive, trying to converge that database to ensure that we do not repeat the same task over and over again, and that we can take a comprehensive set of information that helps us across different industries to address the identity problem is one that is very important. But overall, the upside, I think, that we see in Nigeria is the level of sophistication in terms of the kind of services and the kind of innovation happening in Nigeria. I think that's also been one area that the foreign investors have also driven in the country with all the bets that they've made in the various companies. So when we look at Nigeria, I think relatively speaking, we do have a suite of relatively more sophisticated products than a lot of other countries. The problem is in the depth, that as many people as possible are able to access these services, and that we can use these services not just to serve and improve convenience for the people and the category of customers that are already banked, but that we can use this to drive inclusion. I think that's the major challenge. How we can bring this last batch of 40 million customers that are traditionally excluded in Nigeria into the fold. Overall, I think we're in the right direction, and researches like this would also serve the purpose of stimulating the required debate and conversations that would help us shed more light on these problems and see how we can work together as an industry to fix it. So once again, thank you very much to the Economist team and to everyone that has worked on this research. And I believe it would help us in a number of ways to drive our required objective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soro, for your kind comments and very insightful and deep dive into the fintech domain and what exactly is happening now in Nigeria. Ebehije is our next guest. We are welcoming you and looking forward to be hearing from you on the speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camila, and thank you, Soro. I thought that was really insightful as well. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to say, first of all, a big thank you to the Economist Intelligence Unit for the opportunity to address everyone today. And also to say a very, very good job done on the research. I think I had looked at it earlier before now, and I thought I was really insightful. And some of the data that I saw there were startling. You know, there are times that you hear about things, but when you really see the data, you see the impact. Now, we know that the global economy is witnessing a rise in adoption of digital financial services. And there is no doubt in anyone's mind that fintechs play a significant role in delivering the solutions to address the various lifestyles and the needs. Now, at Mastercard, I'll sort of dwell on some of the things that we're doing at Mastercard to support this fintech. At Mastercard, we believe strongly that fintechs, they are contributing to accelerate the digitization of our ecosystem, and they present a huge opportunity for industry collaboration. I think Osoro alluded to that. Collaboration is actually the word. Now, Mastercard, we all know, today we connect over 2.3 billion cardholders to more than 40 million merchants through our robust network of over 25,000 banks in 200 countries. But we connect the world by not just being the fastest, but most secure form of payment that is available. Now, Nigeria is not left out, and we have built an ecosystem of about 1.4 million merchants processing payment through POS and contactless. And we also process payment for over 500,000 merchants on web, mostly aggregated by the fintechs in Nigeria. So we can see that fintechs are already playing a significant role in Nigeria. What has Mastercard done? In 2019, we launched what we call the Mastercard Accelerate. And now this is a global initiative that sort of helps simplify the way Mastercard works with fintechs, giving them access to the things that is required for them to grow quickly. And I'd like to just talk briefly about it. Now, Mastercard Accelerates offer simple, single entry points to our company-wide portfolio of specialized program. And what it does that it gives support to startup and emerging brands for every stage of growth and transformation, from market entry to global expansion. Now, for our financial institution, partners, customers, Mastercard Accelerates provide access to next generation of innovators with portfolio of startup partners and fintechs ready to co-create and collaborate with new experience. And this is where it's really interesting, because Accelerate comprises of a range of award-winning, and as I begin to talk about it, a lot of the fintechs would, sort of be able to understand this. And, now, there are a few programs we have helped participants all over the world assess benefit from Mastercard ecosystem, customers, and innovation. These programs include Mastercard FinTech Express, there's Mastercard Engage, then the Mastercard Start Path, and the Mastercard Developer. And I want to talk a little bit about the Mastercard Start Path, which has really will resonate with a lot of the fintechs that are here today online. Now, this invite the later stage startup to participate in a 6-month program. And what we do there, we provide opportunity to scale and secure strategic investment. And one of the things that I read in the report is how do they secure such investment, which I believe a lot of the fintechs online will be interested in. Now, so far, more than 200 companies have participated in the Start Path, our program, since it was founded in 2014. And those companies have collectively gone to raise 1.5 billion capital. And now that's what is required within this particular industry. Now, let's bring it back home in Africa. What have we done? Fintechs have gone through the Start Path program and are doing quite well. In Nigeria specifically, we have fintechs like Flutterwave, NetPlus, MaxNG, and even Lydia. Those are some of the Nigerian fintechs that have benefited from this program. But the great news is that this initiative is open to all fintechs in Nigeria today. And as Mastercard has committed to bringing 1 billion people into the digital economy, we know that partnering with fintechs, a lot of which are online today, will play a significant role in reaching the last mile. While I want to say thank you again for the beautiful research work that have been done, I would also like to let everyone know online that we will continue to support the fintech community And then we will work closely, leveraging the power of technology towards driving that inclusive growth, which is required right now in Nigeria. So thank you so much again for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. Thank you. Camila?
Thank you, Abekije. I think you said it very right, and definitely fintech. It's a very important, really important domain, especially now more than ever. And Nigeria is really the driving force in Africa, and not only. We've reached to a very interesting part, the interactive part of the webinar, which is the Q&As. Therefore, we will ask Bewaji to please just read a few of the Q&A questions that were prepared by the audience. Maybe we should start, if there is any questions to EIU, let us know. Let's see what are the questions, or maybe actually Melanie and Irene, maybe you choose some of this and you will just answer, and then we'll have other questions to for MTN and Mastercard. Isn't it, Irene? Can you hear us?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was looking at the question. There is quite a lot of interesting comment rather than question. I guess the only one is whether there was some question on whether we had a percentage growth rate of the fintech sector within the period covered by the report, which I'm not sure we have. Do we have this data, Mel? I think we just studied for Africa, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. So we have a continent-wide percentage for fintech growth, and that's about 24% from 2009 to 2019. And if I can, actually, I do want to read out one of the comments from the audience, which was on the skill set gap. And in fact, they're saying that to create a link between financial inclusion and the increasing number of fintech players, skills on customer-centric product development and delivery for the mass market are essential. And thank you for that comment. I think that's absolutely right. I think it goes beyond the core product development and technical skills that was necessary for proof of concept. And it needs to go into wider business management skills now to really take fintechs into the next wave of growth. So thank you so much for that comment.
And there are quite a lot of questions from our friends in the panel, which is very interesting. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the question for MTN. The question is coming from Shaun Sampson. It says, apart from the Economist publication, what other areas has MTN engaged in partnership with fintech? So, Usoro, do you want to take that question, please?
There's quite a lot of areas. Firstly, we try to foster innovation. And one area we've tried to do that is with our open APIs, which we have across our footprint in Africa. With our open APIs, we're able to offer developers and other companies a seamless way of integrating and exposing their services to our platform. Part of the areas, and I know part of the area that the report had talked about was the sandbox, which has been exposed here in Nigeria by a different company. We offer that across a lot of our footprint, sandboxes that allow lots of companies to come innovate on our platform and see how they can, in a very cost-effective way, expose their services to our customers. So that's one way. Other ways that's no different from what we've just done with The Economist, where we try to sponsor as many reports as possible to look into various critical areas and see how we can, as stakeholders, work towards addressing different problems that bedevil the sector. I think importantly too is also in the area of regulation, where we work with various regulators to see how we can create an optimal operating environment that would foster both innovation and safety of customers in the sector. So those are some of the ways that we're working to drive development in that space.
Okay, thank you very much, Usoro. The next question would be for Mastercard, Abihija. The question reads, thank you for sharing about your accelerator program. To bring this a little closer to home, how is Mastercard partnering with fintechs in Nigeria to enable them to emerge stronger from the current challenge with COVID-19? Abihija, would you like to take that question, please? Hello? Abihija?
Not sure if Abihija can hear us. I see that, the screen is. Maybe in the meanwhile, we ask another question to if we have another question for MTN, maybe to ask it while Abihija is back. Yeah. Yes. Oh, Abihija is back.
Okay. I'm back. Sorry, there's this network. Yes, I think I did. You were talking about what, based on the Accelerate program that I have done, bringing it home to Nigeria or something. You not said something. I didn't hear the last part.
Yeah, so it says, to bring it closer to home, how is Mastercard partnering with fintechs in Nigeria to enable them to emerge stronger from the current challenge with COVID-19?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. You know, the global restriction that has been caused by COVID-19 has really tilted the landscape towards greater adoption of digital channels, and fintechs are an integral part of this whole thing. Now, in the face of COVID-19, what we have done, there have been a global campaign right now, there's a global campaign for social distancing. Now, Mastercard has ensured that virtual cards, contactless, and tokenization capabilities are available for fintechs to drive onboarding, which is really important, because I realized that you mentioned during the research, how do we onboard even bringing the financially excluded, and this will really help them. And then digital transaction, just achieving an overall growth in their businesses. Another thing I like to mention is also that we have what we call the SME in a box, which providing a robust ecosystem marketplace for small businesses. And we are also enabling rewards to incentivize our users and partners at this time. Those are some of the ways that we are working to ensure that fintech or SMEs that have been impacted largely with COVID-19 sort of are able to continue to grow their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abihija. I think we had quite interesting questions coming from the audience. Thank you also to a very interactive audience. And I think today we've managed to really take a deep dive into the fintech domain. Before thanking everyone, I would just like to make a note that while we are preparing for the fintech event, of course, using and actually waiting for the federal government to come with news regarding the events and regarding social distancing. We just want to let you know that this period has been a very interesting period, really creative for all of us, and us in media, really, we had to reshift and rethink and recreate. Therefore, while waiting for the main event to come up as soon as possible, we are also looking at a healthcare event at this point that will be across sub-Saharan Africa with a very similar structure, research that will be done by EIU Healthcare, and then ended up with a beautiful webinar. So we have a lot of projects in Nigeria. Nigeria is the biggest market, and we do not forget the biggest economy in Africa. Therefore, a subject like fintech, it's always, and technology in general, it's always a very interesting one. We are looking forward to seeing you all as soon as possible. Usoro, Abihija, Irene, you're not going to escape Nigeria, and Melanie, whenever is possible. Big thank you to all of you, to the ladies from Economist Intelligence Unit, and also to MTN and Mastercard, and all our sponsors and partners. Another very interesting thing is that tomorrow you have Democracy Day, so happy Democracy Day. Please enjoy yourselves, take a break, forget about webinars and everything else, and just spend time with your family. We wish you to stay safe, which is the most important thing. The same with your families, and to see you as soon as the world allows us to meet in a bigger group. Thank you so much for everything, and see you as soon as possible. Thank you.